The post Oak Bluff is a small bluff in poker. And when we say small, we mean really small. About 1/10 of the pot, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But considering most normal bets are half the pot or greater, 1/10 of the pot is definitely small. Let's look at a hand example. Let's say you're the big blind and your opponent is seated in middle position. Let's say the flop comes out 2, 5, ace. You're first to act on the flop. You check, your opponent checks behind. Now, the turn comes a 2. It's a scary card to someone who was slow playing an ace. It pairs the board, and maybe you decide you want to represent a monster, a full house, a set of 2s, maybe even the straight. So you stick in 100 into a pot of 1,000, a very small bet, 1/10 the pot. You're hoping to make your opponent think that you're actually trying to lure him into the pot with one of the monsters that we just mentioned. You're using reverse psychology. Typically a weak bet would be a weak hand, but you're trying to make him think that that weak, really small bet is indicative of a monster. And he folds, and the post Oak Bluff works. It's not going to work that often though. But what's amazing is because it's so small, it only has to work 1 out of 11 times. Think about it. If you bet 100 into 1,000 10 times in a row, and your opponent shoves all in, it fails 10 times in a row, you're gonna have lost 1,000 chips. And then all of a sudden, the 11th time, it works. Your opponent folds. The strategy is break even as long as you win 1 out of 11 times, and that's why you'll still see a post Oak Bluff used at the poker table. So when would you want to use it? There's 3 criteria that hopefully are all met. At least one of them should be met for you to attempt this type of bluff. First, your opponent should have post Oak Bluffed previously. If he does it, he's more likely to respect it. Also, it helps if you've bet small, like a quarter of the pot or lower, with monsters, with actual monsters, not as a bluff, but with real big hands previously in the session. And you want your opponent to be aware of those small bets. Finally, it would be nice if your opponent has shown that he's willing to fold to small bets. Your opponent has folded to small bets. And when we say small, again, we're probably talking more likely 25% of the pot. 1/10 is super small. But if he's folded to a quarter of the pot or below, that's a good indication he's willing to bet to a small, or fold to a small bet. The bluff gets its name from the post oak tree, which is a small oak tree that's known for producing low quality wood. The move itself is viewed as weak in the poker world, so use it sparingly. Be aware that it's going to make your image pretty bad against good players. They're going to think you're a fishy, weak player, that you're a donkey. So be aware of that, but I've seen it used even in mid-stakes games as a way for good regulars to mix up their game and pretty much just confuse their opponents on how good they are at poker.